This is Inside the Americas, coming up. More than 20 people arrested for domestic terrorism after they target the new cop city in Atlanta, Georgia. That police training center being built on woodland, now a flashpoint of conflict between authorities and left-leaning and environmental protesters. Then Bolsonaro is back. Well, sort of. The former Brazilian president glad-handing Republicans in the U.S., where he has been for months now, his son tweeting, then deleting that his father may soon be back in Brazil. Analysis from Sao Paulo on the way. And from homemakers to home builders, single mothers in Venezuela are using a government program for subsidized new housing they have to make themselves. I'm Jeannie Godula. This week, police in the U.S. state of Georgia filed terror charges against 23 protesters accused of attacking officers at a rally against a planned police training site. Critics claim the center, dubbed Cop City, will only increase police brutality, while environmental activists say it's also exploiting valuable forest land. Kemi Knight reports.
This is the moment police say protesters in Atlanta threw fireworks at them during a demonstration. Hundreds of people gathered at a planned police training site on Sunday to protest its construction. And what started off as a peaceful march and concert turned into violent clashes. 23 of the arrests have even led to domestic terrorism charges that could mean heavy prison sentences.
Attack law enforcement officers, you damage equipment, you are breaking the law. This was a very violent attack that occurred this evening, very violent attack. This wasn't about a public safety training center, this was about anarchy, and this was about the attempt to destabilize.
But the protesters tell a different story. One group says police targeted people at a friendly music festival, tasing them and tackling them to the ground, threatening to use lethal force, which police denies.
In the face of the violent raid that took place last night, as city residents gathered in solidarity to defend this forest, that is an example of the militarization that we are calling out.
The root of the unrest, a law enforcement facility activists are calling Cop City. It's a $90 million project which involves the construction of a police and fire training centre on 85 acres of urban woodland. Activists say it's a vital green space, describing it as the lungs of Atlanta. The plan has become the focus of intense protest over the preservation of the woods, but also over the militarisation of police. In January, police officers tried to expel demonstrators from the site, shooting a 26-year-old activist during the raid. In response, demonstrators set fire to a police car and smashed windows. 6 were arrested and charged under Georgia's domestic terrorism statute, a first in the history of environmental movements in the country.
Also in the U.S. this week, progressive firebrand representative Alexandria OcasioCortez was in the spotlight. In 2021, she made headlines when she went to the star-studded Met Gala wearing a white dress scrawled with the words, "Tax the Rich." Now, though, congressional investigators say they have, quote, substantial reason to believe she may have violated House ethics rules and perhaps federal law by not paying for thousands of dollars worth of hair and makeup, hotel rooms, and the dress rental itself. Now, she eventually did pay for all the costs from her personal accounts as required by law, but only after the House Ethics Committee began investigating last year. Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, has often been called the Trump of the Tropics, and this week he made an appearance, as did the real Donald Trump, at the Conservative Political Action Conference in the U.S. Bolsonaro has been living in Florida for months following his loss to leftist leader Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva. Since then, though, rumors have been flying on just when Bolsonaro might go back to Brazil to stage a political comeback. Also this week, Bolsonaro's son tweeted, then quickly deleted a tweet saying his father could return to Brazil as soon as next week. To talk a bit more about this potential Bolsonaro comeback, I'm joined now by political analyst Guilherme Casaroes in Sao Paulo. Guilherme, thank you for joining us. Let's start with that tweet from Bolsonaro's son, Senator Flavio Bolsonaro. What do you think happened? Did he accidentally let the cat out of the bag?
Well, thank you for having me. It's hard to tell. I mean, it's a very common practice by the Bolsonaro family to tweet something and then delete it. I think that Senator Flávio Bolsonaro doesn't want to create any expectations about the comeback of former President Jair Bolsonaro to Brazil, and that's the reason why he deleted the tweet after a few minutes after posting it. There's been a discussion in Brazil as to whether Bolsonaro could be charged with crimes, different kinds of crimes, corruption, crimes against indigenous populations, or crimes against the environment as he comes back. And many of his supporters fear that Bolsonaro could even be imprisoned in a matter of a few months after coming back. So that's the reason why he's been delaying his return to Brazil. And apparently he's having a good time in Florida with all his far-right supporters, not only from Brazil, but apparently from the United States as well.
Absolutely, because those tweets did come just 3 days after Bolsonaro spoke at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in the U.S. That was last Saturday, where he seemed to indicate he could be planning a new presidential run. Take a listen.
At this moment, I thank God for my second life. And I also thank him for the mission of being the President of the Republic for one term. But I feel deep down that this mission is not over yet.
Guilherme Casaroes, what do you think? That does sound like someone who is hoping to run for president again. Do you think that Bolsonaro could do just that? And do you think he could win?
Well, I think it's possible for Bolsonaro to run again. After all, he's the leader of the far-right movement in Brazil, and there's nobody to fill in his shoes. Apparently, for now, there's nobody who can play the same role as this very personalistic kind of leader of the far-right movement in the country. Of course, Bolsonaro has his wife, Michelle Bolsonaro, who apparently wants to jump into politics for the 2026 elections. His sons as well have been politicians for a long time, but Bolsonaro is still the reference for many Brazilians who feel that Brazil should take an even more conservative turn. Yet, it's still very, very open whether Bolsonaro will be able to run and to win, of course, first of all, because he might be, as I said, charged and eventually imprisoned by some crimes he has committed during this time in the presidency, and also because we don't know what the political landscape of Brazil will look like in 2026. There are some conservative but more moderate right-wing leaders. They're trying to take up the stage as well, such as São Paulo Governor Tarcísio de Freitas, or even Minas Gerais Governor Romeu Zema, who have a more moderate approach to politics, and that's the reason why they might be able to capture some of Bolsonaro's 58 million people base, and that's going to make the challenge for Bolsonaro even more daunting.
In the meantime, Bolsonaro is still in the United States, where there are so many echoes between Bolsonaro and Donald Trump. How much would you say that speech that he gave at CPAC or his association with Donald Trump would actually help him in Brazil?
Well, not so much, really, because Bolsonaro is not actually a very creative politician. He has a handful of talking points, and he goes over these talking points over and over again. So at CPAC, he said about election fraud in Brazil. He compared the Brazilian situation to the American situation in many respects, including the role of the electoral commissions and the Supreme Court. He goes over conspiracy theories about COVID-19. So I'm not sure if this is going to change Bolsonaro's position domestically, especially after the January 8th attacks in Brazil. I think that many former Bolsonaro supporters have decided to move away from him because they finally realized that Bolsonaro might be a threat to Brazilian democracy altogether. So the feeling that I have is that, well, he's in the United States, he's in Florida, that has served as a bunker for far-right ideologies. So I think that the speech that Bolsonaro gave at CPAC was directed to his core supporters, and of course, with the intention of reinforcing these transnational links between the United States and Brazil that have proven very important for Bolsonaro's strategy of an eventual comeback.
Okay, Guilherme from Sao Paulo, political analyst Guilherme Casaroes. Thank you. Next now to our number of the week in Peru, where bird flu has found a new victim, sea lions. 3,487 sea lions have died there due to an outbreak of that disease that's also known as H5N1. Bird flu spread across multiple species in Peru ever since an initial outbreak 3 months ago. 63,000 birds have also been killed due to the virus, as well as a rising number of deaths in other species. And finally, this week marked International Women's Day, a chance for us to meet a group of single mothers in Venezuela who are going from homemakers to home builders. They're using a government program to get subsidized new housing, but the catch is they have to help build the homes themselves. Antonia Kerrigan reports.
There's a housing crisis in Caracas, but thanks to these women, 95 new homes are in the pipeline. Over 8 years, they have become home builders and will soon be homeowners.
I bend ropes, I make moorings, we carry sand, we carry blocks, we carry cement. I really feel good about it, and even more so because it's to get a house for my son's future.
Most of them are single mothers and currently living in cramped conditions with relatives. It started with a government scheme to provide materials and technical guidance free of charge to first-time builders. Unpaid labour in return for a flat in the new Antimano development. The 80% female workforce wasn't planned, but over 8 years they have torn up the rulebook in Venezuela's conservative patriarchal society. 17-year-old Luiz helps out his mother on the building site. His mother who has become the on-site expert on reinforcement bars.
It's the first time I've met a woman who is a rebar master, and I feel even prouder because she is my mother. I would never have thought that my mother would be a rebar master, nor that we would have this great opportunity to have a house, a home.
But these women are not always met with the respect they deserve.
People often say, "Here come the macho women," because they do this physical labor. I say no, I am completely feminine.
The first 2 flats in the development will be finished this year, a major milestone for the project, whose progress has been marred by the pandemic, a dire economic crisis, and the increased cost of building materials.
Well, that wraps it up for this Inside the Americas. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time for all the news from north to south.
From North to South Africa, from Bamako to Nairobi, from Accra to Mogadishu. Bringing you all the political, economic, cultural and social news from Africa for a better insight into an ever-changing continent.
Across Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin-Smith on France 24 and France24.com.